All right. So today I'm going to just talk about some basics, network monitoring and analysis. So for the past 5-6 years, I've been doing, SOC type stuff, and I've been in, analyst roles, leadership roles, and now I'm sort of in a training role. So, for the past few years, I've been training analysts all over the world. Just having a great time trying to spread the knowledge. And so what this is just a quick, 45-minute summary of, for those people that want to get started in doing analysis. So how many people, and it's hard for me to see here, but how many people here already do some sort of network monitoring and analysis? All right, I can't, so a few. So how many people have never done it at all? One. Okay, so does anybody want to be my volunteer that's never done it? All right. We could just pick Bob. All right. You don't have to come up or anything, so. We got, all right, one person. What's your name, sir? Marcus. All right. All right. Yeah, you don't have to come up. I'm just going to abuse your name. Sorry. All right. All right, so Marcus. All right, so first of all, just do my normal disclaimer slide, obviously. Got to put that out there for the lawyers. But for those that don't know, I'm from the metropolitan DC area, specifically in the Northern Virginia area. So for most of those have heard there's a lot of groups, a lot of different security groups up there. There's, the primary one is the Nova Hackers. So I would just like to thank the AHA group here for being the inspiration for that group. So a little bit more about me. I have about 20 years in security. I started out doing web application security, some pen testing. Got into doing more of the security engineering type work, so went from doing a lot of hands-on type stuff to writing a lot. And then since I'm in the DC area, FISMA and doing CNA is a big thing there. So I started doing that, and that involved more writing, and then they found out that I could write. So they started, hey, you should write proposals too. But then they found out that I couldn't lie, so. So I really wanted to take a step back to doing more hands-on stuff, so I got into a nice little group where we were doing trade studies. So we would bring different security tools in and do trade studies on them. And then, like I said, the past 5-6 years, I've been working in the security operations environment, doing, from doing analyst type stuff, in leadership type roles, advisory roles, and also doing security training, which is, I think the funnest, because that allows me to, still shape the direction of the program, but I still get, I still get to keep my hands on doing some of the fun stuff and sharing my knowledge out. So for those that don't know, I have a website, and just to sort of plug for that, novainfosec.com. And also, I'm working for somebody now, but I'm looking into getting in to do more consulting work. So if you're interested in anything that I'm talking about here today, and you think I can help you, come see me, please. All right, so now into the monitoring and analysis topic. So just going to hit a quick introduction, basically a nice little background, the environment that you need. Once you have set up, look at the methodology. What is the process that you as an analyst needs to go through to investigate an alert that pops up. And then lastly, where can you learn more? So I have tons of resources there. Depending on your background, areas that you may want to improve in, certifications, different trainings, stuff like that. All right, so the introduction. So first of all, why would we want to do something like this, or who would this be useful for? So I found it very useful for myself because, like on the picture on the left there, I was just a general security practitioner. Did some web app testing, some pen testing, and I did a lot of security engineering and writing, but I really didn't get any operations experience. And so, just general security practitioners that are interested in, doing something. I think that's a little bit more exciting than just doing some of the general security stuff. So that's definitely. I just think it's a fun field. I mean, like if you're just starting out, working in a SOC is a great place because you can start at a very junior level there and really get hands-on tools and understand how those tools work. So that maybe later in your career, like if you do end up doing more engineering type work, it'll help you design those systems better. And then secondly, you may be an analyst, maybe you're just starting out, and so just giving you the scope of what's going on within the SOC, and then being able to identify the areas or the gaps that you have, and then being able to use this as sort of a roadmap to fill those gaps. And like I said, lastly, it's just kind of fun, it's like getting out there and solving a mystery. Hey, somebody attacked me. Let's figure out what's going on. All right, Marcus. So what do you think monitoring or network monitoring and analysis is? We need to mic them up. Uh-oh. Yeah, so it's the practice of monitoring and analyzing networks? Well, I came up with a better one, so No, really, it is the collection, analysis, and escalation of indicators and warnings to detect and respond to intrusions. That's some, fancy definition. Since I'm in the government space, I probably grab that off of NIST or some DoD publication. But that's just a basic one. You're going to go out there, there's an alert, and you're going to try to find out as much as you can about that. So I kind of broke it down into 3 phases. There's the selection phase, there's the triage phase, and the analyze phase. So the selection phase I'm going to talk about more later, but that's like, you have thousands of alerts that are popping up. Which one do you select? Where do you start? The triage is, you may have a lot of things that look good, but how can you really separate the signal from the noise? And then the last one is those ones that you really care about, taking them down and trying to analyze them as much as possible. Is this a false positive? Is it not a false positive? Is it something that, is it an actual attack? And then what's the effect of that attack? All right, Marcus, so what do you think selection is?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Anybody else? No, all right. Analyzing alerts, yeah. Any other thoughts? Any hands? I really can't see too many hands. Good. Prioritization, all good answers. Yeah, identifying something that looks like an anomaly. All right, so definitely those are all part of that process. I think some of the answers are maybe in some of the later phases, but I just broke it down into choosing the alert to investigate. I mean, like I said on the previous slide, there's thousands of alerts that pop up, and how do you go about choosing what to look at? And really, like I said, the goals here are to choose the high quality or the higher quality and relevant alerts that come from the sensor, because unless you have a sensor admin that's really on top of their game, there's just going to be a lot of false positives, just thousands, and how do you break those down? So you as an analyst have to know the best method for selecting the highest quality alerts. And the order, I mean, it basically varies by organization. So usually most SOCs that I've worked with, they would come in and they would have, like good SOCs, they'll have a process that basically says, all right, well, you're going to look at these types of alerts first, then these, and then if you have time, you can get to the rest. So it varies, but generally they have some prioritization, which the gentleman over here said, where you're going from high to low priority. And then the next thing is triage. So Marcus.
I'd probably say something about reducing the amount of damage being done, trying to mitigate further damage, that kind of thing, kind of putting a bandage on it, I guess would be a good way of putting it.
Okay, good, yeah. So that's a good answer. That's further down the phase though. So that's more whenever you get into, I think, more the incident response phase, which I'm not really covering within this talk because that's another team. But yeah, that's a great start. So my definition is, really to separate the alerts needing further analysis from the irrelevant alerts. And the goals here are to basically identify the alerts that need further investigation. So it's basically going through and quickly just sweeping away all those things that you don't care about or that that are bad, and then keeping in front of you the alerts that you're going to take to the next phase. So the activities are to look at the alert and why it fired. So, an alert on an IDS pops and, all right, well, why did this fire? Because if you can look at the signature and then maybe get a little bit of PCAP that's associated with that, then you can figure out, well, is this something false positive or is it something that looks real that I have to take into the analysis phase? Look through prior write-ups and reports. And this is something that I don't see too many SOCs doing, but look through previous incidents that have been written up and do that every step, because 9 times out of 10, somebody else has seen what you are seeing right now. And if you can search your internal knowledge base of the different write-ups or a lot of cases too, like there's the official incident report, but then there's also, I guess, write-ups where they're not incidents, but they took the investigation so far. I mean, and even if it doesn't result in an incident report per se, they're still useful stuff. And just throwing
Mic check.
All right, awesome. Can you hear me now? All right, so I forgot where I was. Yeah, but just really go through and look at all that prior knowledge, because what you really want to do here is avoid reinventing the wheel. Instead of spending an hour doing some analysis, maybe last year someone did the exact same thing, and you can save a lot of time there. And then lastly is look at some of the open source and internal resources. So you may want to, based on the stuff that's in the alert, you can analyze those resources. All right, so the next one is, what is analysis? Marcus.
Figuring out what happened, the extent of the damage, how it got in, would probably be my best guess.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So it's really, out of those thousands of alerts, you've narrowed it down to 10, and now you're looking at this particular one. And so, and it's really just trying to figure out everything associated with it, trying to learn as much as possible about that particular attack. And usually in doing this, I call them supporting resources. So this isn't alerts that maybe come from a sensor, like an IDS per se, but it's more of just logs and just supporting resources. So you could look at things like NetFlow, full packet capture. You could look at email logs, your proxy logs, and so being able to analyze, take what you have, so you have that indicator that's associated with the alert, and trying to dive into some of these different supporting resources and trying to learn as much as you can. So the goals are to determine the actions that the attackers have taken throughout the network, just as Marcus said. And the activities are to identify key indicators from the alert and then use them to search all the different supporting resources. And the examples that I give here are just NetFlow and full packet capture. Right, so so that's just a little that's a basic background in learning the fundamentals of what network monitoring is. The second thing that you need to focus on is the environment. And so we're going to look at things like the sensors, the supporting resources, which I talked about, SIMs or loggers, and then looking at a basic monitoring architecture, and then look at some really cool integrated environments that are out there. So the sensors, and this is just a box that's analyzing traffic, and they're usually placed at strategic points throughout the network. So in most cases, these are at your ingress and egress points. Some people may put stuff on, outside your network to monitor what's going on there. Some people may put them, say, behind your gateway. It just depends what your goals are. In most cases, like I've been talking about so far, this is usually an IDS. And there's definitely two. There's it could be something that's passive, or it could be something that's active. So that's an IPS. And then the other two ways to look at this too is you usually have two types of detection systems. You either have something that is signature based. So here's a set of characters that are usually this far within the packet if you see that alert. And then there's anomaly based, which is basically watch the network for a period of time, determine a baseline, and then decide what your threshold is. And then if the network deviates beyond that threshold, set an alert. And there's a whole bunch of other sensors here, but like I just talked about the IDS and the IPSs, which is where most people start out. But there's alerts. You have stuff at the host. You have stuff for email. You have stuff. File servers. There's a lot of different sensors that you can have out there. So the supporting resources, as I talked about, this is data that you can correlate off of. So usually the alert has an indicator associated with it, and you can take that indicator and search through your supporting resources. And so that's what we mean there. There are two types of supporting resources. There's internal and there's external. Ideally, you would want to get all these resources and pull them together in a SIM so that you would have to log, or so that you would only have to go to one place to make your analysis more effective. But really, you are getting logs or whatever to track everything going on and into and outside of the network. And you're using that data to pivot onto using the alert. So the common supporting resources here is we have the internal. So at the network level, I've already mentioned these. There's NetFlow and full packet capture. You have device logs, so firewalls, routers, switches, a lot of great stuff there. There's application logs, so things like mail servers, web servers, file servers, your AD or your DNS logs in proxy logs. And then there's other maybe detective or preventative tools that you may have out there that could be useful as a reference. So maybe by default, for your IDS, you just say, all right, well, if it's ranked low, then I'm never going to look at it. That just sort of falls off. But maybe you're investigating an alert, And you may want to go back through your IDS alerts and see if there's a low one that was triggered based on that same attack, but you didn't see it because the alert was low. So there's stuff like that you can do. And then next is the having a SIM or some sort of logger. So basically taking all this data that you have so far and trying to centralize it into one place. So, you know, data from your sensors, data from your supporting resources, and if you can, data from external resources too. So, and then basically configure those to show your alerts. Ideally, what you would like to do if you have a true SIM is use data from multiple places and being able to correlate them off each other. So by that, I mean, you know, using two indicators or two data points together, which would have a higher probability of being a true positive. So examples of SIMs out there. So there's your pure SIMs. You know, ArcSight's been around for years. Alien Vault's nice. It's open source, so that's a great place to start there. And there's a lot of other ones there that I'm not going to mention. And then there's tools that maybe started out as like log collectors, and then they've added stuff onto them to act sort of like a SIM. So a lot of people like Splunk, and then if you want to do the more open source focus, there's the Elk Stack, which is kind of fun. So in the end, you end up with something that looks like this. So I think in the center of the picture there, you have your NIDS, which is, I think, you know, where most people are starting. Following the red boxes. So you have sensors, you know, like a lot of host-based sensors that you can have out there. So, you know, most companies have the endpoint solutions, and so, you know, those can be on the user LAN, on your server LAN, you know, maybe some of the different services that you're offering out in the DMZ. And then you have your supporting resources. So you have all the green stuff there. So you have, you know, just basic operating system logs, stuff that's going on in the user LAN, the server LAN, and then, like I said, with the web server, like the web logs, maybe you have a proxy there, so you can have your proxy logs. Email, you know, one of the, probably the email is the #1 attack vector, so, you know, having those email logs to correlate off of is very important. And you have your firewall, so the logs associated with that, you know, the router logs, so the router logs themselves, but then you can also generate NetFlow based on that. And then lastly is full packet capture, if you can have that sort of resource available to you. And then lastly is all the external stuff. So talked about, you know, Google. And there's a lot of open source resources that are out there, but 9 times out of 10, what I found is most useful is just going to Google and searching for that indicator, whether it be a hash, a domain, IP, whatever. But if you want to dive down a little deeper, there's lots of whois and DNS type resources. There's reputation databases on a website. There's things like passive DNS so that you can see the history of a particular domain. There's web archives, passive scans, so you can look at Shodan, and like if you just want to learn a little bit more about an IP, you can just search Shodan without touching them, or without touching the actual attacker to get the number of, to just understand a little bit more about what they're doing. And then there's a lot of meta sites that are out there, so things like Virus Total, Passive Total. I mean, there's a lot of them out there now, so that you can use, and you can just go in and put in your indicator, which is usually an IP domain or whatever, and then search through that and learn as much as possible as you can about it. So, so the last thing in this section that I wanted to talk to you was just looking at some of the integrated environment. So the one that I like the best, and I think most people have heard of it here, is Security Onion. So basically, you just take an old box, or you can spin it up in a VM. There's various different deployment options that you can do. Get a router that allows you, or a switch that allows you to have a span port or something that you can tap off of, and then just plug, one interface of Security Onion into the tap, and then the other interface goes right into your internal network, and you can basically watch everything there. So it's really easy. You go in, install it. There's a VM version, or you can install it from scratch on Ubuntu, and then there's a whole wizard, and you run it, and very easy to set up. The other tool which I've run is pfSense. So this is primarily a firewall distro, but it's very customizable. There's a lot of modules that you can add to it. Not as network monitoring focused as, say, Security Onion is, but definitely something to start out. So, like, I set that up, and they have Snort that you can just add in. There's a proxy, and there's VPN, and then there's all kind of other interesting plugins that you can put there. But once again, it just requires like an old desktop, load it on, and it's pretty easy to get started. So Security Onion is probably the most well-known, started by Doug Burks, I don't know, probably 3-4 years back. But basically it starts, you have Ubuntu, which it runs on. It's currently, I think, solid on 12.0. What is it, 12.02 or whatever but what? Yeah. So yeah, then it's recently been upgraded. I think literally like in the past month or two, that it's now up to Ubuntu 14. But from a sensor perspective, you have various IDSs that you can run. You can, Snort, you can do Suricata, or you can do more event-based event detections using Bro. And they also it integrates with the open source OSSec tool. So you can get some host information there. Probably not as focused on that right now, but so the other very useful piece of data is NetFlow. So the tool that they have there is Argus. So that's a command line tool. So you really got to get in there and learn some Linux. But there's a lot of NetFlow is very useful in just trying to figure out what happened within my network without actually doing full packet capture. Between NetFlow and full packet capture, I will call them like application or protocol logs, and so that's where Bro comes in. By default, there's 10 Bro logs, and things like HTTP, email, and so it gives you more data than, say, NetFlow does, but it is in full packet capture. So you can go in and maybe like in an email, instead of just seeing the connection, you would go in and see, all right, this host talked to that host, and this was an email, and it was sent from this person to that person, and this was a subject, and there was this attachment. So it's information like that. And also, you can use Bro scripting to, update that, pull out more stuff if you want. And then on the analysis side, there's a Web 2.0 interface, N00b, but I think most people stay with using SQL or Squirt. So just two nice interfaces that take all the alerts from your IDSs and pull them in to those interfaces. So all those alerts show up, and you can even do cool things like right-click on it and say, show me the full packet capture associated with this alert. And then so it'll go out, grab that from daemon logger, open that up in Wireshark. So it's a great tool just to start out with. There are various deployment options for it. So you can actually just, during the setup wizard that they have, you can actually run that and just have everything sitting on one box, which is the upper picture here. You can also run it and you can separate things out by, hey, I only want this box to be a sensor. So as you're going through this setup wizard, you can just do the sensor part and then put that out in your network. And then maybe within your network, you would put a server, and then you could have a console too. So you can basically separate that up, and you can support more than one sensor. So you can have a bunch of different sensors out there too. So you can put it in multiple places. It's not, I mean, it's definitely not like big enterprise, but it's good for just like if you have nothing, it's just great to start out with. So, so you have, you know, a basic background of what's going on in doing basic network and monitoring. You know the environment that's out there, you know, but now how do you actually do it? You know, what's the methodology or these steps? So we touched on these points in the intro section, but dive down a little deeper here. So the selection phase, this is where we're going to, like we said, choose the alert to investigate. And like I said, that process varies by organization. So one particular method to the right is they had, you know, sensitive stuff that I won't talk about here, but there was just very super high custom stuff. And so if those alerts popped, you would always look at those first. And then there were just these average custom signatures that they ran. And then after that, some people like to look at alerts one by one, but then they'll also group them by the types of alerts. And some people will, you know, look at the extremities. You know, look at the alerts that fired a lot versus the alerts that may be fired a few times. And then, you know, just to finish things off, if you have time, you can get down to the default medium priority and low priority. So, but the tips here, and this is more from a management aspect, is, you know, don't cherry pick. So I know, like, you're in a environment, and the particular one that I've been in is they actually count, like, oh, you've written this many incident reports. And so what analysts would do is they would go pick the easy ones and then just write those and get high counts. So, you know, if you're in a management position, you know, definitely don't push that sort of culture. And then second of all, if you're an analyst, you know, and you really want to learn, you know, don't cherry pick. I mean, get a few good ones, but then try to go for some of the harder ones, stuff that you haven't seen before versus stuff that you're comfortable with. And also, one of the things too is if you see alerts that pop that have, and they're always false positives, and so, you know, let the people that manage the sensors know, you know, hey, I see this alert 1,000 times a day, it's always false positive. Can we, you know, tighten up the signature, or can we disable it? So, you know, just let them know. Because what you want to do, you know, hopefully get rid of as much noise as possible so you can focus on those truth threats. So the second step is triage, and so just kind of flow charting this out. So this is where you're going to look at the details of those alerts that are left and find out why it fired. So the general methodology here, if you have a SIM, you know, most people, they'll see this alert start in the SIM. But usually the SIM doesn't have enough information there for you to look at it or to determine if it's relevant or not. So what a lot of analysts do is they'll start out in the SIM, and if there's information that, if there's not enough info there, then they'll go to the tool that fired it. So maybe it's your IDS, you know, Snort or Circata or whatever. And so the basic process there is that you'll look at the rule description. So, and this is especially important whenever you're starting out. Don't just look at the alert name, go in, see if it has a CVE, see if there's any articles written about it, really try to understand what that is, what that alert's finding, because that'll help you determine if this is something you have to worry about or not in your specific case. So then, if you can, look at what the rule is actually firing on, grab the PCAP, or hopefully the tool that you're using has a little snapshot of the PCAP that shows what it fired on. So you can look at that, compare it with the rule, and see, well, is this something we have to worry about or not? So I'm trying to think of a good example there. So, if you have a sensitive word like chair, and you don't want that, like the word chair leaving your infrastructure, or say chair is used in some sort of an attack. So you may get a lot of alerts on chair with just people, just they have a document and they're writing, hey, I sat in the chair. So what you can do is you can look at the PCAP and you can be like, hey, this is, oh, they're just writing an email here, versus maybe chair used in a different context is a lot more sensitive. So try not to use any sensitive language there. And then the next thing you want to do is compare with the prior knowledge, and this is a step that I talked about before. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go out there, see, has somebody seen this alert? What was their analysis? Look at the source and destination IPs. What have we seen this? Have our partners see it? And then that gets down to the next stage where you're looking at the source and destination IPs and ports. And I'm sort of mixed whether I include this step in the triage or if I include it in the analysis. But for now, I just put it here because you can look for things like, hey, well, they're sending a Linux exploit, or they're doing an attack on a Linux box, but the target in this case is Windows. So all right, well, we don't got to worry about that, right? So you can just do quick lookups like that to quickly filter out what you do and do not have to worry about. So the last one is analyze. So this is where you're going to, like I said earlier, you're going to go through and you're going to look through all those supporting resources and determine the impact on your network. So usually this is based on what you know so far. So usually within the alert, there's indicators. Maybe in the triage stage, you've determined more indicators that are relevant to this attack as well. And so you search through all your different supporting resources to learn as much as you can about those indicators and the attack as a whole. So you're going to do, usually you do the process, and I think most people are familiar with it, but they use a term pivot. So, hey, I have an indicator, maybe it's an IP, and then I'm going to pivot off that, say, using my proxy logs. So I'll go through my proxy logs. Oh, have I seen that IP? Yes. And then maybe with that proxy log, you would get maybe an internal host. So, oh, hey, this internal host was talking to this bad external host. And so now you can use that internal host IP as an additional investigation point. So, well, who is that? So maybe then you would have to pivot off that IP to the DHCP logs to see who had that, and pivot it maybe to a user so that you could question them. So, and I've tried to explain the process to a lot of people over the years, and this is kind of the best that I could come up with, was trying to determine or trying to give a picture or a methodology of what the indicator or what the process is for doing analysis. So I just call it the indicator analysis cycle. I was going to call it like the cyber analysis chain, but I don't know, I might get sued for that. But anyway, so, and this is the basic process, so it's kind of like one of those OODA loop things, right? So you have a stimulus, which is usually your alert. So from that, you're deriving an indicator, and you're going to search your knowledge base. So you're going to see, have we seen anything like this before? Then you're going to determine the indicator resource. You know, where can I look in my supporting resources for this so I can learn more about it? And then you're going to query it. You know, so in that example, when like for doing the pivoting. So the next question comes up is we're going to document the results in the knowledge base. Now, two things can happen at that point. Maybe that indicator could occur elsewhere in another resource. So you could, you know, that's another trail that you could go off. Or as part of your query, you discover another indicator that you can pivot off of. And then so that just cycles back to where you search your knowledge base, determine indicator resource, query resource, right? And so you do this over and over. And as an example, it may look something like this, but it could be, you know, it could go on. I mean, this is a recursive thing. But eventually you would go through this whole process and you would take everything as far as you can go. And hopefully things start to fold back up. And so you essentially learn everything, you know, based on that attack, you have a very thorough, or you did the analysis process, so you have a very thorough understanding of everything associated with that attack. Now, this may take forever because it could go on and on and on. So you need something to maybe kind of bring you back in. And so that's where some of these different techniques here. So, you know, the most basic is this timeline analysis. So taking the information that you're learning and only following the paths that are relevant to your particular timeline and laying them out there and seeing where you have holes and going back and trying to fill those holes. And that's where some of the different intelligence frameworks come out too. So you can use that as the same process. Like you discover, you know, we have the kill chain here. So you discover something in the delivery phase, you know, so but then maybe you could be, oh, well, what if they successfully got through, what did they do at the exploitation phase? You know, and so you could follow those trails that were on the previous slide to try to fill what happened at each one of those phases. And so there's some other chains out there. I mean, and the big point here is with these frameworks, you know, there isn't a right or wrong one. There's just the one that you use. So just choose one and use it, or make one that's relevant to your specific group. All right, so the last point, the last here is where we can learn more. And so when starting out, analysts, like you usually determine where their gaps are. And you said, hey, you need to take a course in this, that. So I've tried to summarize these. And this was from a, Jack Crook did a post a while back about, you know, like their training curriculum. And I thought it was really good, so I kind of took that. But the first thing you want to learn is Linux, right? Because by default, Linux has a lot of the analysis tools that you need by default. So there's like a lot of just basic commands that you want to learn. There's intermediate commands, and then the advanced type stuff. So whenever you get into sorting, uniquing, and cutting, and doing regular expressions, and doing scripting too. So, you know, if you're looking to, you know, take yourself to the next level, Linux is a great place to start. Especially if you want to learn more, and one of my recommendations later is going to be set up Security Onion at home, and that's all Linux-based. So, the second thing that you want to learn is just the networking basics. You know, understand the basic networking concepts. You know, so we're talking here about the OSI model and the TCP IP stack, common ports and protocols. So know that. you're not going to go too far unless you know that. Taking networking to a little further, really being able to understand how to analyze collected traffic. So we have a picture of Wireshark here. So definitely go out. There's courses that you can take on using Wireshark. The command line version of that is tshark. And of course we have TCP dump, which is useful if you have a huge packet and you want to carve it down, which you do in Linux. And then you have snort. So that really started out as a packet capture tool, and then they turned it into an IDS from my understanding. But definitely some tools that you want to use there. And also snort, because most people, whether you're using snort or it's commercial or if you're using Suricata or whatever, most of them have a snort-based signature. So being able to use snort can go a long way in helping understand, give that feedback to your sensor admin of how to update the signatures so that you get better alerts. So the next thing is flow analysis. So I think we talked about flow. So that's basically the 5-tuple, like, hey, this IP, talk to this IP. And then the source port was this, and the destination port was that, and this is how many bytes that were transferred. So just stuff like that. It's very useful in just doing quick analysis. Like, say you get some intel that, hey, some IP is attacking all the finance companies, and so you work for a bank, and so you can quickly just go through your NetFlow data and, hey, has this IP touched us? Yeah. So you can do stuff like that. Silk is the big tool there. In Security Onion, I think they have Argus, which you can turn on. Pretty similar. I actually, as part of my work, I teach probably like a half-day course in Argus. So it's a religious debate, which is better if you're going to do Argus or NetFlow. So the next thing that you really want to learn is log analysis. And now you don't have to understand all these logs by heart, but just understand, to a point where if you're confused on what one of the fields are, you can just do a quick Google search. So things like your proxy logs, firewall logs, router, switch, DNS, your mail logs, and your web logs. And also your host logs too. So you may have logs associated, just the default ones that are within Windows, but you also may have the endpoint protection, suite, whatever tool you have. There's probably logs associated with that. And then where you can learn more, and I'm a big, and I've been recommending this site probably for the past few years, but it's opensecuritytraining.info, and they have different paths that you can follow here. So this is the one that's, School of SOC. And so they have down in the center there, like the network flow analysis, the log analysis in SIM, the network packet analysis. So there's some courses that they have there that are really great. And so I just did, these were the from Open Security Training. It's a little hard to navigate through there, so if you just want to Google these particular titles, you can learn about, flow and network hunting and do network forensics and also doing PCAP analysis using all the different tools. Training and certifications, those are definitely a good place to start. I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know, personally I'm more interested in the knowledge that the certification's giving versus the cert, but in industry, we have to have certs. So from SANS, if you can afford it, so the GCIA and the GCIH are probably the two best out there. If you're in the DoD realm, you're probably familiar with the 8570. So they have a grouping for the CND-A and CND-IR. So the main ones there, once again, are the two SANS ones, and they have CEH. So talk to me before choosing one of those first. And then the other certs you can get, just common vendor tools. So, like, say you use ArcSight. Well, ArcSight probably has some sort of cert. Or say you're using SourceFire, so they probably have a cert. And then the Doug Burks, the guy that that developed and maintained Security Onion, he has a course. He has like a 1-week course that he does a few times per year. So it's a great course. Definitely check that out. So the other place, and this is where I really started out years ago, right, is challenges. I remember up at, as part of the Nova Hackers, kind of a spin-off of that group, we had, what were they called? Oh, they were called packet parties. And so we would get together and we would use this resource here, this shell-storm, and we would go through and find packet analysis challenges. And as a group, we would just work through and teach one another. So yeah, so that, the shellstorm.org, there's a CFP repo from all the major conferences. So you can go there and find the ones that are related to doing, network monitoring, maybe incident response, and do those. The other one is I really like. There's his name's Brad. I don't know his last names, but it's malware traffic analysis.net. He has I forget his Twitter, but I definitely would recommend following his Twitter too. But he has a whole page where he puts together probably once a month training exercises. So definitely check that out. And there are many, many others. There's the honey nut challenges that are out there. SANS has some that they get out there. There's the big one that comes around every year is the Ed SCOTUS Christmas Challenge. So. And then exploit exercises, and then there's other places like VulnHub and stuff like that. But the big thing is really try to focus more on the defensive ones. So a lot of the CTFs are more offensive focused. So really try to go and find the ones, and that's why I like the whole PCAP challenges, because that's if you can do those. I remember we were doing this one, and it was meant for high school students, and we had people sitting around the table, and we're all professionals, and we're sitting there going like, high school kids are doing this? I can't believe this. So it was pretty challenging. All right, so then lastly, just to close things out, so here are my top 5 tips for those that are starting up. So first, set up Security Onion at home and just start looking at traffic and alerts that are popping there. So you just need the old beige box, get a router that has a tap on it, and go to town. I said this before, don't cherry pick. You're not only cheating yourself in learning, but you're also cheating the SOC in the defense that you're trying to present. Alert sensor admins of reoccurring false positives. So don't, you got to do this instead of seeing that same alert time and time and time again, and it's always a false positive. Let them know. Try to learn as much about the tool that they're using, and maybe even help them. Hey, can I help you update this signature so that it doesn't fire as much? The other one is never touch the adversary infrastructure. So you get, like, an attacker hits you, and so you're really not supposed to touch their attacker IP, because you could theoretically be tipping your hand, and as soon as they see your IP hit their IP, they know that, hey, well, they caught me, and so they can learn something by that. Kind of related to that is there's a lot of external resources that you can use. As an example, if you just want to deobfuscate, base 64, right? Well, hey, you can go to a website and do that, and it's probably not bad to do that, but maybe instead write a quick bash script or a Perl script to do it instead. So you're learning more, and it's a little safer. You don't have to worry about that. And the last one is to know your network and your sensor and where all your supporting resources are inside out. That is, you have to know that. You have the home field advantage, and if you don't understand your network, you know, you're putting yourself at a major disadvantage there. So that's all that I have. Are there any, I don't think I have any time for questions. So I guess I can stand out in the vendor room there after this. But I just want to give a thanks to ISSW for having me this year. Look forward to the rest of the con. You can find me on Twitter at Grecs. I have my website there. And that's it. Thank you.